And we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, that show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. As usual, it's me, Jake Baldino, and today we're talking about The Division 2, the follow-up to the original Division that released in 2016. And so far, The Division 2 is looking very good. Now, what I do want to say right off the bat, if you weren't a fan of the first one and you had strong opinions about it, I don't know if this one's gonna magically win you over or anything. It's a games as a live service looter shooter. For some people, that might not be your cup of tea. You're still gonna go on long sprints through city streets, enemies are still kind of bullet sponges, and you're still grinding at the end of the day. But what you get here is a refinement of the original game. The Division took a long time to really fully come into its own, adding a lot of great ideas and tweaking stuff after it was released, but most people wouldn't know that if they didn't stick with it. Now, you get to experience a lot of those good decisions here in The Division 2 with a lot more stuff. I think for the type of game it is pretty good. Full 100% disclosure though, I was a fan of the original Division. It had a lot of problems, but it was like the first looter, shooter, live game that got its hooks in me. I just like third-person shooting, and it just clicked. And even though I felt like it ran out of steam, I kept popping back in to see the updates and stuff. So that's some context going into this one. Sorry to be long-winded in this intro, but one more thing I gotta note. These types of games are so hard to do before you buy videos on. From the beginning, when I came up with the idea for Before You Buy videos, I wanted it to simply be as a service to you guys. You know, to get out a first impressions video as quick as possible to just get you informed about some of the basics of the game, and just to make sure it's not a complete disaster. A game like this takes so much time, and since these are first impressions, no, I didn't get to experience too much of the endgame content. Please keep that as a heads up. All signs are pointing to the endgame content adding an extra layer and being totally worthwhile though. There's been a big focus on it, and early signs are pointing to good, especially because you get to pick a class and things really change up with the new enemy type that are the real deal. But really here, I can only outline the structure surrounding it. These games take a month or two to really settle in with a community and show their true colors once everybody takes to it, so take all that as you will. But first things first, starting out, you're introduced with a pretty lame opening sequence. I don't think the game makes a good first impression at all. The original Division didn't have much in terms of story either, and this one just kind of keeps that going. Anytime there's any sort of cutscene or real character introduction, the game just doesn't give me much of a reason to care. And what I do like is that the game kind of understands this, and traditional game story does take a backseat after a while. It's very simple to just set up what you're doing, tease the endgame enemy type, set up your base, and then you're off and running. From there, it's discovering stuff in the environment and learning about what happened, listening to radio chatter, talking to people, and just kind of stumbling into your own adventures. That's where the story kind of is, as corny as that sounds. And I think it works well because it lets the game kind of breathe and not get caught in the weeds of confusing itself and stumbling over lore and possible inconsistencies. This is a game where you shoot people, and the game lets you do that, and it focuses on that. Now, first thing you'll notice is that the game, at least at the start before things ramp up, it does play relatively the same. In terms of shooting, running, taking cover, and using abilities, it's pretty standard. Some things actually carried over from the first game that I didn't like. I'm still not a fan of how grenades are thrown, and I really wish there was a manual crouch button just to kind of, it complicate things. But movement does still feel better overall now. You're a little lighter on your feet, and you feel less of a ka-chunk in your steps. Shooting feels pretty substantial too. All guns definitely have a different feel to them, and attachments changing up stats make a noticeable difference too. The big thing though is that there's subtle feedback in place to make the enemies feel less like bullet sponges. They still technically are bullet sponges, taking a lot of damage. The damage numbers and the RPG stuff is the cause of that, of course. But the armor breaks down and enemies stumble around as they're shot, just kind of making it feel a bit more satisfying. Putting 2 whole magazines of ammo into an enemy feels a lot better when halfway through you see an ammo break indicator and feedback while an enemy stumbles for a moment. Lots of enemies have different weak points on them too that you can kind of embrace, which just makes it a little more interesting and a little more engaging. Because despite literally all you do in the game is shoot dudes, it manages to feel pretty continuously satisfying, at least to me, especially because there are explosive canisters and little containers of gasoline and barrels everywhere in the game to just shoot and explode. It's freaking dumb how many there are, and it's hilarious, but it makes it fun. I don't know. Enemy types are decent. Creative-wise, they don't feel as cool as the first game, but, a lot of them boil down to being somewhat similar, a little less over the top, but, they each come with their own, specific enemy types and gadgetry types, and each one usually has, a really cool big bad. They are still kind of dumb, though. While I appreciate getting flanked occasionally, making it more difficult, There are far too many enemy types who just either don't take cover fast enough or just run straight at you. Now, I get those enemy types, especially the early stuff. They're like crazy people. I get it. But the other variants have no excuse. Sometimes they just feel like dummies. Not to mention when I run into the occasional glitch and enemies clip through walls or don't actually react until I shoot through like 3 of them. And once or twice they just popped up out of nowhere. Occasionally things got a little messy. But thankfully, even though I think they can be goofy, they can still be challenging. And ultimately, that's what I'm looking for here. The enemy types only get better the further you go in. And like I said earlier, the endgame Black Tusk bad guys are the real deal. Missions involve going to unique locations and shooting people and then getting out. For the most part, with some tweaks. They can get a little predictable, but I can't put my finger on quite why. I just still enjoy it. I think it's the feel of the shooting, the tension of getting closed in on, and just a general challenge. Also, of course, the progression, which I will get to in a bit. Playing with friends makes all the difference. This game is great for that. But on the flip side, I gotta say, I'm still a mostly solo player. I'm a little more old school. And a big reason why I appreciate The Division is that I can play through all of the main and side quest content pretty much completely solo and not really feel like I'm missing out on something. That is huge to me as a player. Exploration is quiet while alone, but still engaging. But again, try to matchmake or experience the game with some friends or randos because it definitely does kind of heighten things. Now, it is nice too because the game lets you matchmake pretty much any time, like when you die, when you want to do missions, or maybe you want to engage in the PvP mode called Conflict, or you just want someone to free roam with. And it's worth mentioning that the side quests here are pretty damn solid. I was surprised to see that a lot of them felt like mini main story missions. They had unique locations, little bits of dialogue, mission parameters, and totally felt not cookie cutter, which is really nice. Progression also helps with the side quests to feel like there's a lot to do, a lot to work towards, and a lot of ways to just get stuff, improve and level up your character, and craft things. Now, it's a big loop. It's pretty overwhelming, and a lot of which I can't spend the time here to break down all of it for you, but essentially, you still have your upgradable base of operations, this time in the White House, which is really cool, but you also have plenty of outposts to capture throughout the world, and you can feed these outposts as resources to get perks and keep the locals patrolling and keeping the area safe and also helping you out in random encounters. It makes the world feel way, way more alive than the original Division, which I still think New York is a cooler location. As a New Yorker, I'm totally biased, but the recreation of DC here is spot on. It's pretty incredible. As an East Coast guy, I really love the way this development team builds the worlds and atmosphere. Even if this wasn't like an always online shooter thing, it would still be a world worth exploring because they clearly care here. But on top of the outposts and typical social hub safe houses, you also have sub-areas like little civilizations that require tons of work to upgrade. Doing stuff in the world and collecting things upgrades these mini civilizations, and they can be safer, have more resources, and in return, you get everything from crafting blueprints and perk points to new NPCs that will show up and give you more side quests and just kind of keep the loop going. But seeing a place build out in front of you is just really satisfying, and the fact that it ties in with the world and just makes it feel like there's things going on works. Oh, and at one point there is a mission to steal the Declaration of Independence, so shout out to that. But the Dark Zone also returns, and for me, it's still one of the big reasons why I enjoy The Division and The Division 2. These are multiplayer areas where the stakes are really high, enemies are tougher, everything is scarier, and random players in the world can either help you and work together, or screw you over and take your stuff. It makes it all tense and stressful, but really rewarding if you get through because you earn better loot. Things feel similar, but are strengthened this time with more things popping up in the Dark Zones to complete, as well as how players going rogue are handled. There are 3 Dark Zone areas in DC, but there are also 3 tiers for how stuff escalates, and it adds more of a layer to the whole risk-reward thing. Not to mention that they kind of expanded upon the Dark Zone level stuff that you have. And rewards generally overall feel good. The loop of always getting new gear and weapons stays interesting, and crafting and rolling your own guns and equipment make it even stronger. I mean, collecting resources feels natural to the looting system, and crafting can be pretty awesome once you get some blueprints. I wish there was more emphasis on cosmetic items though. You generally find less out in the wild than in the Division 1, and that used to be one of my favorite things with multiple layers. Now it's simplified. There are less layers, and you can also grind for loot boxes to get more. Thankfully to me, I mostly ignored it. It didn't really hurt the experience. But overall, the thing the game is designed to do, keep you playing, keep you shooting, and keep you looting, is done really well. There's a lot of freaking content here, from Dark Zone with its own leveling systems, to building out the settlements, like I said, to the map size in general, the missions, and the PvP modes. I'm looking forward to how this game turns out over time with expansions, but first impressions here are very good. It seems like they got the formula totally right this time. But of course, this is a before you buy. You know how this works. I gave you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion, so now I'm definitely going to want to hear yours down in the comments. There might be a good chance you just don't like games as a live service type of thing. That's completely understandable. I'm very selective. This is literally the only one I really like, but I want to hear from you whether you're into these games or not. If you were hardcore into The Division, let's talk. If you've been jumping into this, I want to know what you think. By the time we do publish this video, most of you may have gotten to the end game, so I do want to know your thoughts on that. But really, let's talk anything Division down in the comments. We'll be down there talking to you guys as much as possible, but it's worth saying, if you learned a thing or two from this video, maybe we helped you out in your buying decision, clicking the like button is the best way you can help us out. And if you're new, it's definitely worth subscribing because we put out new videos every single day. But hey, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.